fog clung to the cliffs like a shroud as our van wound up the narrow road to Blackthorn Manor. I pressed my face against the window, catching glimpses of the Pacific Ocean far below, its waves crashing against jagged rocks. The air smelled of salt and pine, but there was something else, an undercurrent of damp earth and decay that made my stomach twist. "This place is straight out of a Gothic novel," I said, trying to lighten the mood. Marcus sprawled across the back seat, with his camera dangling from his neck, snorted. "Elena, you're already spooked and we haven't even checked in. It's just a resort, not a haunted castle." Nora, who was driving, shot him a playful glare through the rearview mirror. "Let her have her fun, Marcus. Blackthorn's got history. It's not just a resort. It used to be an asylum back in the 1800s. Creepy, right?" Lila, sitting beside me, looked up from her notebook, where she'd been sketching a fern. "Creepy's an understatement. I read about this place. They did experiments here. Lobotomies, electroshock, you name it. Some say the patients never really left." Samir, scrolling on his phone, chuckled. "You guys are buying into the tourist trap hype. It's probably just a marketing gimmick to lure thrill seekers like me." I rolled my eyes but couldn't shake the unease settling in my chest. Blackthorn Manor loomed ahead, its spires piercing the fog like skeletal fingers. The building was a mix of Victorian grandeur and decay. Ivy crawled up its stone walls, and the arched windows gleamed like eyes watching our approach. We pulled into the gravel lot, and a porter in a stiff uniform greeted us, his smile a little too tight. "Welcome to Blackthorn," he said, grabbing our bags. "You're in for a treat." Inside, the lobby was a spectacle of polished wood and crystal chandeliers. But the air felt heavy, like the weight of a storm about to break. A faint humming vibrated through the walls, almost imperceptible, like a heartbeat in the building itself. I glanced at Lila, who frowned, her fingers tightening around her notebook. She felt it too. Our suites were on the 3rd floor, overlooking the cliffs. My room was lavish. Silk curtains, a 4-poster bed, and a balcony with a view swallowed by fog. But the details nagged at me. A flickering light bulb, a faint scratch mark on the headboard, and a groundskeeper outside, raking leaves in the drizzle. He didn't look up, but I felt his attention on me, sharp and unwavering. That evening, we gathered in the dining hall for a welcome dinner. The room buzzed with other guests, their laughter echoing off the vaulted ceiling. A server poured wine, and Nora raised her glass. "To new adventures in surviving Elena's ghost stories." I forced a laugh, but my eyes kept drifting to the far corner, where the groundskeeper stood, half hidden in shadow. His face was weathered, his eyes sunken, and he was staring right at me. I looked away, my pulse quickening. After dinner, we lingered over dessert, swapping stories about our lives back home. Marcus was mid-rant about clickbait headlines when I noticed the humming again. Louder now, like a whisper just out of reach. "Do you hear that?" I asked, cutting him off. "Hear what?" Samir tilted his head, listening. "It's like voices," I said, straining to make out words. Lila's eyes widened. "I thought it was just the wind." Marcus scoffed. "You two are feeding each other's paranoia. It's probably the pipes." But Nora's smile faltered. "Let's call it a night. We've got a big day tomorrow." Back in my room, I couldn't sleep. The fog pressed against the balcony doors, thick and alive, muffling the world outside. Around midnight, I heard it. Soft rhythmic whispers like voices chanting in unison. I crept to the window, my breath fogging the glass. Nothing but gray mist stared back. I was about to turn away when something slipped under my door. A folded piece of paper. My hands trembled as I picked it up. Scrawled in jagged ink were 3 words. They never left. I froze, my heart pounding. I checked the hallway, but it was empty, the silence deafening. Back in my room, I locked the door and pushed a chair against it. Sleep was impossible now. I lay in bed, clutching the note, every creak of the manor amplifying my fear. Just before dawn, I jolted awake to a cold draft. My balcony doors were wide open, the fog curling inside like ghostly fingers. On the floor, leading from the balcony to the foot of my bed, were muddy footprints, too large to be mine. The morning after the muddy footprints appeared in my room, Blackthorn Manor felt different. The fog hadn't lifted, blanketing the cliffs in a gray haze that muffled the world beyond. I barely slept. The cryptic note. They never left, burning a hole in my pocket. I showed it to the group over breakfast in the dining hall, where the clink of silverware and chatter of other guests felt strangely distant, like a radio tuned to the wrong frequency. "This is creepy as hell," Lila said, tracing the jagged handwriting with her finger. Her voice was low, as if the walls might be listening. "Who slipped it under your door?" "No idea," I replied, glancing around. The groundskeeper was nowhere in sight, but I could still feel his stare from last night, like a splinter under my skin. And those footprints. Someone was in my room. Marcus leaned back, arms crossed, his journalist skepticism kicking in. "Elena, you sure you didn't track in mud yourself? You were pretty spooked last night. Could have been a trick of the light." I glared at him. "They were huge, Marcus, way bigger than my feet, and the balcony door was locked when I went to bed." Nora, stirring sugar into her coffee, looked uneasy. "Maybe it was a prank. You know, resorts like this play up the haunted vibe for tourists." Samir, scrolling through photos on his phone, wasn't so sure. "Prank or not, this place gives me the creeps. Did you see that old chapel by the garden maze? It's boarded up like they're hiding something." "Let's check it out," I said, desperate for answers. If this place has secrets, we're not just going to sit here and wait for them to find us. After breakfast, we bundled up against the damp chill and headed to the resort's sprawling grounds. The garden maze loomed ahead, its overgrown hedges twisted into unnatural shapes by years of neglect. Beyond it, the chapel sat like a forgotten relic, its weathered stone walls streaked with moss. A rusty chain locked the double doors, and the stained glass windows were too grimy to see through. Lila knelt by a patch of wildflowers near the maze, her botanist instincts kicking in. "These plants, they're not native. Someone planted them deliberately, like a marker." She pulled out her notebook, sketching furiously. "There's a story about this place, old folklore. They say the asylum's head doctor was obsessed with keeping patients' spirits trapped here, even after death." Marcus snorted, kicking a pebble. "Ghost stories? Come on, Lila, next you'll say the fog's cursed." She shot him a look. "Laugh all you want, but places like this hold on to their past. You can feel it." I did feel it. A weight in the air, like the fog was watching us. Samir wandered toward the chapel, tugging at the chain. "This lock's new," he said, frowning. "Why board up a chapel unless you don't want people snooping?" Nora shivered, hugging her jacket tighter. "Can we not talk about this out here? It's freezing and I swear I heard something in the maze." We all froze, listening. A faint rustle came from the hedges, like footsteps crunching leaves, but the fog was too thick to see more than a few feet. "Probably a squirrel," Marcus said, but his voice lacked conviction. That afternoon, we split up to explore more of the resort. Samir and I headed to the library, a dusty room lined with leather-bound books and faded portraits of stern-faced doctors. While Samir poked around the shelves, I noticed a small weathered journal tucked behind a row of encyclopedias. Its pages were brittle, the ink faded, but the words sent a chill down my spine. It was a patient's diary, dated 1897, describing a failed escape attempt. The final entry read, "The Watcher sees everything. He's in the walls, in the fog. He'll never let us go." "Samir, look at this," I whispered, showing him the page. His eyes widened, and for once he didn't crack a joke. "This is messed up," he said. "Who's the Watcher?" Before I could answer, a shadow moved across the room, quick and silent. I spun around, but no one was there. The humming I'd heard last night was back, louder now, like a chorus of whispers circling us. Samir grabbed my arm and we bolted for the door, the journal clutched in my hand. That evening, the resort hosted a guided night tour of the grounds, promising a glimpse into Blackthorn's storied past. We joined reluctantly, sticking close together. The guide, a cheerful woman named Clara, led us through the fog, her lantern casting eerie shadows. She spun tales of the asylum's grim history, patients locked in cells, screams echoing through the night. But her smile never wavered, like she was reading a script. As we neared the maze, Nora lagged behind, her face pale. "I need a second," she muttered, stepping into the fog. We waited, but minutes passed and she didn't return. Panic surged through me. "Nora!" I called, my voice swallowed by the mist. Marcus and Samir fanned out, shouting her name. Lila grabbed my hand, her grip tight. "She was right here," she said, her voice trembling. Just as we were about to run for help, Nora stumbled back, her eyes wide with fear. "Where were you?" I demanded. I got turned around," she said, avoiding my gaze. "The fog's so thick. I thought I saw someone, but it was nothing." Her hands were shaking, and I knew she was lying. Before I could press her, Clara ushered us back to the manor, her cheerfulness strained. The scream from the chapel hung in my mind like a stain that wouldn't wash out. We stood outside its chained doors, the fog curling around us like a living thing, the silence heavier than ever. The hum from the manor pulsed faintly, a rhythm that seemed to sync with my racing heartbeat. Clara, the tour guide, returned with the security guard, their faces tight with forced calm. "False alarm," Clara said, her voice too bright. "Probably just a guest who wandered off." "Bullshit," Marcus muttered under his breath, his eyes narrowing. "Someone screamed. We all heard it." I glanced at Nora, who was staring at the ground, her hands stuffed deep in her pockets. She hadn't said a word since her disappearance in the fog, and her silence was starting to feel like a wall between us. Lila clutched her notebook, her knuckles white, while Samir paced, his usual bravado replaced by a nervous energy. "We need answers," I said, stepping toward Clara. "What's going on with this place? The note, the footprints, the scream. None of this is normal." Clara's smile faltered, but she waved a hand dismissively. "Blackthorn has a colorful history. It's easy to let your imagination run wild. Why don't you all head back to the manor? We'll handle everything." Her words felt like a brush-off, and I wasn't buying it. Neither was Marcus. "Handle what?" he pressed, his journalist instincts kicking in. "You're hiding something. What's in the chapel?" The security guard, a burly man with a scar above his eyebrow, stepped forward. "The chapel's off limits for safety reasons. Old structure, unstable, go back to your rooms." But I couldn't let it go. The journal's words, "The Watcher sees everything," echoed in my mind, and the muddy footprints in my room felt like a warning I couldn't ignore. "We're not leaving until you tell us what's going on," I said, my voice sharper than I intended. Clara exchanged a glance with the guard, then sighed. "Fine. The chapel's just old, like he said. We keep it locked to avoid liability. Now please, let's not make a scene." We reluctantly followed them back to the manor, but the tension among us was palpable. Nora lagged behind, her eyes darting to the shadows. Lila whispered to me, "She's not telling us something. Did you see her face when we heard the scream?" I nodded, my stomach twisting. "She's been off since the maze. We need to talk to her." Back in the dining hall, the other guests had resumed their chatter, but the air felt charged, like the moment before a lightning strike. We sat at our table, the journal lying between us like a forbidden artifact. Samir flipped it open, his brow furrowing. "This patient, they wrote about hearing voices, seeing shadows. Sound familiar?" "Too familiar," I said, glancing at the windows. The fog pressed against the glass, thick and impenetrable. The humming was back, softer now, but undeniable, like whispers seeping through the walls. Marcus leaned forward, his voice low. "I'm digging into the groundskeeper tomorrow. He's been watching us since we got here. I saw him near the chapel before the scream." "Good idea," Samir said, "but I'm not waiting. Elena, you up for a little nighttime adventure? That chapel's hiding something and I want to know what." Lila hesitated, her fingers tracing the fern sketch in her notebook. "It's risky. The folklore I read, it said the asylum's doctor used the chapel for experiments, not just prayers. People disappeared there." "All the more reason to check it out," Samir said, his eyes gleaming with reckless determination. Nora finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "You shouldn't. It's not safe." We all turned to her. "What do you know, Nora?" I asked, trying to keep my tone gentle. "You've been acting strange since the maze. What happened out there?" She swallowed hard, her eyes flickering to the floor. "I just got lost, that's all." "You're lying," Marcus said bluntly. "You saw something, didn't you?" Nora's hands trembled, and for a moment I thought she might bolt. But she stayed silent, her lips pressed into a thin line. That night, Samir and I waited until the manor was quiet, the other guests tucked into their rooms. Armed with flashlights and the journal, we crept through the foggy grounds to the chapel. The chain on the doors was still intact, but Samir pulled a small multi-tool from his pocket. "Never leave home without it," he said with a grin, working the lock until it clicked open. Inside, the air was stale, thick with the smell of mildew and something metallic. Our flashlights swept across pews covered in dust, a cracked altar, and walls etched with strange symbols, spirals and jagged lines that seemed to pulse in the dim light. "What the hell is this?" Samir whispered, tracing one with his finger. I moved toward the altar, my beam catching a faint seam in the floor. "Samir, over here." Together, we pried open a trap door, revealing a narrow staircase descending into darkness. The air that wafted up was cold, carrying "We shouldn't go down there," I said, my heart pounding. Samir's jaw tightened. "We're already here. You want answers or not?" Before I could answer, a noise came from outside. A low, deliberate scrape like boots on stone. We froze, our flashlights flicking off. The chapel doors creaked, and a shadow moved across the stained glass windows, tall and distorted. My breath caught in my throat. Whoever it was, they were circling the chapel, their footsteps slow and purposeful. Samir grabbed my arm, pulling me toward the trapdoor. "We can't stay here," he hissed. We descended the stairs, a trapdoor closing behind us with a soft thud. The darkness swallowed us, the hum growing louder, more insistent. My flashlight flickered, revealing damp stone walls and fresh footprints in the dust, too fresh to be from years ago. "Someone's been here," I whispered, my voice trembling. Samir nodded, his face pale. "And I don't think they're gone." We followed the tunnel, the air growing colder with every step. The whispers seemed to come from everywhere, weaving through the walls like threads of a nightmare. Then, at the edge of my flashlight's beam, I saw it. A figure standing at the tunnel's end, motionless, its face hidden in shadow. The figure at the end of the tunnel didn't move, its silhouette sharp against the faint glow of my flickering flashlight. My pulse thundered in my ears, drowning out the relentless hum that pulsed through the stone walls. Samir's hand tightened on my arm, his breath shallow. "Elena," he whispered, barely audible. "What the hell is that?" I couldn't answer. My throat felt like it was closing, the air thick with the scent of damp earth and something sharper, like rusted iron. The figure stood motionless, too tall, too still, its edges blurring into the shadows. I wanted to run, but my legs felt rooted to the cold floor. The whispers grew louder, not words but a cacophony of overlapping voices, urgent and unintelligible, like a crowd trapped just beyond the walls. "Back up," I managed, my voice trembling. We took a cautious step, then another, the trapdoor behind us our only escape. But before we could reach it, the figure vanished, swallowed by the darkness as if it had never been there. Our flashlight flickered again, then died completely, plunging us into black. "Elena!" Samir hissed, fumbling with his own light. It sputtered to life, casting jagged beams across the tunnel. The footprints we'd seen earlier stretched ahead, leading deeper into the earth. "We need to get out of here." But curiosity, or maybe stupidity, pulled me forward. "Not yet," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "Those footprints are fresh. Someone's been down here and I want to know why." Samir hesitated, then nodded, his jaw tight. "Fine, but if we die, I'm haunting you first." We followed the footprints, the tunnel sloping downward, the air growing colder and heavier. The walls were lined with rusted metal pipes and patches of mold. But there were other marks too. Scratches, like fingernails had clawed at the stone. My mind flashed to the journal's words. "The Watcher sees everything." Was that what we'd seen? Or was it something worse? The tunnel opened into a wider chamber, the beam of Samir's flashlight revealing a grim scene. Rusted medical tools, scalpels, syringes, and strange hooked instruments were scattered across a cracked stone table. Faded papers, yellowed and curling, lay in heaps, some bearing names and dates from over a century ago. I picked one up, my hands shaking. The handwriting was frantic, detailing treatments that sounded more like torture. Patients strapped to tables, subjected to experiments meant to cleanse the soul. "Jesus," Samir muttered, holding up a photograph he'd found among the papers. It showed a group of men in old-fashioned coats, standing in front of the chapel. One figure, taller than the rest, had a face scratched out, the ink smeared as if someone had tried to erase him. "This place is a nightmare." I froze as my eyes caught something else. A ledger with a list of names. Halfway down the page, in the same jagged handwriting as the note under my door, was Elena Voss. My stomach lurched. "Samir, look at this. My name. It's here." He grabbed the ledger, his eyes wide. "That's impossible. You've never been here before, right?" "Never," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "But it's my name, clear as day." Before we could process it, a low groan echoed through the chamber, like metal bending under pressure. The hum intensified, the whispers now a chorus of anguished cries. Smear's flashlight flickered, and I grabbed his arm. "We need to find the others. Now." We retraced our steps, but the tunnel seemed different. Longer, the walls closer. The footprints we'd followed were gone, replaced by fresh ones that veered off into a side passage. Against my better judgment, we followed them, the air growing colder with every step. The passage ended at a heavy iron door, its surface etched with the same. Samir pushed it open, revealing a small room lit by a single flickering bulb. Crates lined the walls, but in the center was a circle of stones, each carved with those same spirals and jagged lines. The air here was thick, almost suffocating, and the whispers were deafening, like a storm trapped in my skull. "We shouldn't be here," I said, my voice shaking. But before we could turn back, the door slammed shut behind us, the sound reverberating like a gunshot. As Samir pounded on it, but it wouldn't budge. The bulb flickered wildly, and in its stuttering light I saw something move, a shadow, quick and silent, darting behind the crates. "Did you see that?" I whispered, my heart racing. Samir nodded, his face pale. "We're not alone." We searched the room, our flashlights cutting through the dark. Behind a stack of crates, we found a bundle of cloth, stained and tattered. I unfolded it, revealing a hospital gown, its tag marked with a name, Margaret Voss. My breath caught. Voss wasn't a common name, and the coincidence felt like a knife in my chest. Was this connected to me? To my family? Before I could say anything, the whispers stopped, replaced by a single clear voice, low, menacing, and unmistakable. "You shouldn't have come here." We spun around, but no one was there. The bulb exploded, plunging us into darkness. Samir's flashlight died too, and the air grew so cold my breath fogged. Footsteps echoed, slow and deliberate, circling us. I grabbed Samir's hand, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst. "Elena," he whispered, his voice trembling. "What do we do?" I didn't have an answer. The footsteps stopped, and in the silence I felt it. A presence, heavy and oppressive, like eyes boring into my soul. Then with a deafening crash, the iron door flew open, revealing nothing but the dark tunnel beyond. But the presence didn't leave. It was still with us, waiting. The iron door gaped open, a black maw leading back to the tunnel. But the oppressive presence in the room didn't fade. It clung to us, heavy as the fog outside, its invisible weight pressing against my chest. Samir's hand trembled in mine, his flashlight useless, its beam swallowed by the darkness. The whispers had returned, no longer a chorus, but a single chilling voice that seemed to come from inside my skull. "You can't leave." "Elena, we have to move," Samir whispered, his voice barely audible over the pounding of my heart. But my legs felt like lead, rooted by the hospital gown I still clutched, its tag, Margaret Voss, burning in my mind. Who was she? And why was my name in that ledger? I forced myself to nod. "Okay, let's go." We stumbled toward the door, the cold biting at my skin. The tunnel stretched endlessly, the walls seeming to pulse with the hum that had haunted us since we arrived at Blackthorn Manor. Every step felt like wading through quicksand, the air thick with dread. The presence followed, its footsteps echoing just behind us, always out of sight. We reached the trapdoor to the chapel, but it was jammed shut, the wood swollen and unyielding. Samir pounded on it, cursing under his breath. "It's like this place doesn't want us to leave." "Don't say that," I snapped, though I felt the truth in his words. The manor, the fog, the whispers. It all felt alive, conspiring to keep us here. I shoved the gown into my pocket and helped him push, but the trapdoor wouldn't budge. The footsteps grew closer, deliberate, like a predator toying with its prey. "Elena!" A voice called from above, faint but unmistakable. It was Marcus. Relief flooded me, but it was short-lived. The presence surged, the air growing colder, the hum now a deafening roar. Something brushed against my neck, icy, like fingers trailing across my skin. I screamed, spinning around, but there was nothing there. The trapdoor finally gave way, splintering as Marcus and Lila pulled it open from the chapel side. "Get up here now!" Marcus shouted, his face pale. We scrambled up the stairs, collapsing onto the chapel's dusty floor. Nora stood by the altar, her eyes wide with fear, clutching a flashlight that flickered erratically. "What the hell were you doing down there?" Marcus demanded, helping Samir to his feet. "We found something," I said, my voice shaking as I pulled out the gown in the ledger. "My name was in here. And this, it says Margaret Voss. I don't know who she is, but it's too close to be a coincidence." Lila's eyes widened as she took the gown, her fingers tracing the faded tag. "Voss. I read about a family tied to the asylum. The head doctor, Dr. Harrow, had a sister named Margaret. She was a patient here, locked away after she tried to expose his experiments." My stomach dropped. "Experiments?" Lila nodded, her voice low. "Occult rituals. Harrow believed he could trap souls, keep them bound to this place. Margaret was his test subject. The folklore says she's still here, tied to the manor by his rituals." Nora's face crumpled, and she sank onto a pew. "I saw her," she whispered, her voice breaking. "In the fog during the tour. It was my sister Claire. She died years ago, but I saw her clear as day standing in the maze. She told me to leave before it was too late." We stared at her, the weight of her words sinking in. Marcus, usually so skeptical, looked shaken. "Nora, why didn't you tell us?" "I thought I was losing it," she said, tears streaming down her face. "But it's real. This place, it's not just haunted. It's holding something." The chapel's symbols seemed to glow faintly in the flashlight's beam, their spirals twisting like eyes watching us. Samir grabbed the journal from his pocket, flipping to the final entry. "It says here the Watcher, Harrow, sealed something in a chamber below. A ritual circle. We saw it down there, Elena. The stones, the symbols." "We need to end this," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "If Harrow's ritual is keeping something here, we have to break it." Lila shook her head. "It's not that simple. The folklore says breaking the ritual requires a sacrifice, someone to take the entity's place." The air grew colder, the hum rising to a scream. Shadows moved along the walls, not cast by our flashlights, but alive, writhing like smoke. My vision blurred, and for a moment I saw her. Margaret, her face pale and hollow, her eyes locked on mine. She reached out, her fingers brushing my cheek, and I stumbled back, gasping. "Elena!" Marcus grabbed me, pulling me toward the group. The shadows converged, forming a figure at the altar, tall, cloaked, its face a void. The voice came again, louder inside my head. "You're mine." "We have to do it," I said, my voice trembling. "The ritual. We can't let this thing keep us here." Samir nodded, his face grim. "The chambers are only shut, but if it needs a sacrifice..." "I'll do it," Nora said suddenly, her voice firm despite her tears. "If it's Claire down there, trapped, I want to set her free." "No," I said, grabbing her arm. "We're not losing anyone. We do this together." We descended back into the tunnel, and the shadows following, the hum now a deafening wail. In the chamber, the ritual circle glowed faintly, the stones pulsing with an unnatural light. Lila traced the symbols, reciting words from the journal, incantations to undo Harrow's work. The air crackled, the shadows screaming as they swirled around us. I saw Margaret again, her face twisting into something monstrous, her voice merging with the entity's, "You can't break me!" But Lila kept chanting, her voice steady, and the stones began to crack, light spilling from their fractures. "Nora, now!" Lila shouted. Nora stepped into the circle, her hands shaking as she placed a photo of her sister on the stones. The shadows lunged, but I grabbed Nora, pulling her back. The circle erupted in light, the hum fading to silence. The shadows dissolved, and the air grew still. We stumbled out of the tunnel, the chapel quiet, the fog outside thinning. But Nora's photo was gone, and she was trembling, her eyes distant. "She's free," she whispered, but her voice held no relief. We left Blackthorn the next morning, the manor's spires fading into the fog. No one spoke on the drive back. Months later, I received a package. No return address. Inside was a photo of Blackthorn Manor, its windows dark. In the foreground, barely visible in the fog, stood Nora, her face pale, her eyes empty, holding the photo of her sister.